He held her hand. He poured the wine. He whispered the same line. In the same bar. At the same table. To someone who wasn't her. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just watched. And realized. She wasn't the one being cheated on. She was the one used to do it. Lena from Chelsea, she wasn't the one being cheated on. She was the one used to do it. Series 10 True Affair Stories from New York. The bar was dim and familiar, tucked between a wine shop and a florist Lena loved on 19th. She walked in out of the February wind, pulling her scarf loose and scanning for Olivia. But Olivia had just texted. Emergency shoot. Rain check. I owe you a whiskey. Lena smiled at the screen, tucked it away, and hesitated by the door. She could turn around, head back to her apartment, pour a glass of something and let the night dissolve. But the warmth of the place, the soft jazz overhead, the faint scent of orange peel and cloves convinced her to stay. Maybe just one drink. Maybe just 15 minutes. She moved toward the bar, found a corner stool, and ordered a dry white. The bartender remembered her, poured without asking. She looked around, absently. The room hadn't changed. Same flickering candles and short glasses, same couple in the booth near the window, arguing gently about red or white. Her eyes drifted toward the back, past a velvet curtain that half hid the booths where couples went when they wanted to disappear. And then she saw him. Ben. Seated in the far booth. Relaxed. Laughing. Not with her. The woman across from him had long dark hair, a soft silk blouse, her hand resting lightly on the table. Lena couldn't see her face, but she saw the shape of the smile, the way her head tilted. She watched as Ben poured her a glass of wine. Not handed but poured. Smooth, practiced. The same way he'd done for Lena the night they first kissed. In this very booth. At that exact table. With that exact bottle. She didn't move. He touched the woman's wrist as he set down the bottle. Gentle. Deliberate. The way he used to with her. Like she was made of something delicate he never wanted to break. Lena blinked. The candle on the bar flickered, and for a moment she thought she was watching a memory. But it wasn't. It was happening now. The smile he wore, half playful, half worshipful, was one she'd memorized. It was his just us smile. The one he'd given her when she asked him, early on, if he ever wanted something real. The smile that had said, without words, "This is it. We are." Lena picked up her wine glass but didn't sip. She didn't confront. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just watched. He leaned in. Said something. The woman laughed, low and warm. And then he reached out, brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. That did it. Not the touch. The gesture. Because it wasn't just familiar. It was rehearsed. Copied. Perfectly replicated from a night that had once meant everything to Lena. She set the glass down. Stood. Walked out into the cold. She didn't shake. Didn't rage. The city moved around her fast, alive, indifferent. But inside her, something had stilled. It wasn't heartbreak. It was recognition. Not of Ben. Of the role she'd played. She hadn't been loved uniquely. She'd been repeated. And for someone who lived by the lens, who trusted the power of framing and light, there was no greater betrayal than realizing you were just a double exposure in someone else's archive. She walked home without checking her phone. The white wine still on her tongue. And the image of that booth, her booth now shared, now mirrored, now ruined, stamped behind her eyes like the afterimage of a flash. She knew one thing as she unlocked her door. This wasn't over. But it wouldn't be loud. It would be studied. And this time, she'd be the one behind the camera. She didn't sleep much that night. Not from crying. From thinking. At 3:14 a.m., Lena pulled the old Nikon from the closet. The one with the cracked grip and the 50mm lens she loved for portraits. She hadn't used it in months, not since she started shooting weddings full-time. But this wasn't work. This was study. She started with Instagram. Ben's account was private, but he'd accepted her follow months ago. She scrolled. And scrolled. He rarely posted, but when he did it was curated, cityscapes, obscure books, whiskey, occasional glimpses of restaurant interiors with no people in frame. She looked closer. There. A reflection in a wine glass. A strand of long, dark hair in the corner of the frame. Same wine bar. Different night. She took screenshots. She checked mutuals, people he followed, liked, interacted with. One woman posted a carousel from the Highline 2 weeks ago. Second image, Ben's jacket sleeve. His watch. The exact watch Lena had once gifted him for his birthday. More screenshots. She found another, brunch in Williamsburg. A caption with 2 wine glasses clinking. Third image, a mirror shot, Ben's profile in soft blur. Each detail layered. Every caption, every location, versions of a life she thought was theirs. Replayed. Repackaged. She started to map it. Not digitally on her wall. Old school. Printouts. Strings of notes. Black pins for overlaps. Red pins for identical spots. The wine bar, the bookstore in Nilita, the bench in Central Park where he once told her he wasn't ready, but might be. That line had been repeated, word for word, in a comment he left on someone else's page last month. She checked her phone messages. Voice memos. Her own photos. Everything began to blur. Ben hadn't been improvising. He'd been performing. And she had been just one of the scenes. The thing that twisted deeper than betrayal was how carefully it had all been recycled. Nothing sloppy. Nothing desperate. Just efficient. Rehearsed. Refined through repetition. It wasn't about love. It was about symmetry. She set up her tripod the next day. Started shooting herself in the apartment, same poses she remembered from his photos of her. She reenacted the gestures. The laughter. The angles. Then she'd go out and shoot from behind corners. From a rooftop. From behind glass. Watching Ben. Following the new her. She never interfered. Never got too close. just observed. Each shot went into a folder labeled replica. Some nights, she'd stare at two photos side by side, hers and this woman's, same hand position, same scarf, same tilt of the head as Ben leaned in. She wasn't jealous. She was fascinated. He hadn't just repeated a relationship. He had recast it. And what she had mistaken for romance had been a study in consistency. It wasn't until she saw the woman wearing the same leather gloves she'd once lost in his apartment, gloves she'd never found, that Lena understood something truly cold. She hadn't been cheated on. She'd been practiced, tested. A soft launch for a better performance. By the end of the week, Lena had over 40 prints laid out on her apartment floor like a gallery. She stood over them barefoot, sipping lukewarm coffee, and saw the shape of it all. The curve of Ben's manipulation wasn't a spike of cruelty. It was a loop. A loop he didn't even bother to disguise. And now she had it. In frame. In focus. Unmistakable. The bar was quieter than usual. Rain pressed against the windows in steady rhythm, muting the jazz in the background. Lena arrived early, chose the same booth, the one where Ben had first poured her wine. She set the small projector on the table. No menu. No drink. Just silence and anticipation. Ben arrived 5 minutes late, umbrella dripping at the entrance. He spotted her immediately. Hesitated. Then walked over like nothing was off. "You look focused," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. She didn't answer. She pressed play. The projector hummed. The first photo appeared on the blank wall beside them. Ben, smiling. A woman, long dark hair, laughing. Same table. Same wine. His hand on hers. Second slide. A different cafe. Same chairs. Her scarf. Her coat. His eyes fixed, familiar. Third. Park bench. Their bench. Another woman. Same hand on thigh. Slide after slide. Angle after angle. All perfectly framed. The same choreography. Different actresses. Ben didn't flinch. Didn't ask her to stop. He watched it like a man attending his own retrospective. When it ended, Lena didn't move. She let the last image linger, her own face, next to a newer one. Their heads tilted at identical angles. Two ghosts in the same light. She turned to him. "Did you love me?" she asked. "Or did you just recycle well?" Ben leaned back, folded his hands. "You were the only one who saw it," he said softly. "That's why it had to be you?" She studied him. "So I was just another version?" "No," he said. "You were the proof. The frame that cracked." He wasn't defensive. He wasn't cruel. He said it like fact. Lena nodded. Slowly. "That's all I needed to know." Ben didn't try to follow her when she stood. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't deny anything. And that, more than anything, confirmed it all. She walked out into the rain, not with anger, not with closure, just with a certainty that her pain wasn't imagined. It was curated. And finally, archived. The gallery was small, tucked behind a bookstore in the West Village, with whitewashed brick walls and hanging Edison bulbs that cast everything in warm amber. She called it loops. No one who attended the opening knew the full story. They didn't need to. On the walls were 34 prints. Each image captured a nearly identical moment, staged across time, places, and people. A man's hand brushing a lock of hair. A shared glass of wine with blurred city lights behind it. The tilt of a smile caught in half shadow. Arms wrapped around waists on park benches. Whispered words in the soft corners of cafes. Different women. Same gestures. Same choreography. The repetition was deliberate, haunting in its subtlety. Lena didn't include names. No faces were fully shown. Only fragments. The intention was not to shame. It was to reveal. And to remember. She moved through the space as the crowd did. Quiet. Watching people tilt their heads, murmur to each other, feel a strange familiarity they couldn't quite place. She heard one woman whisper, "This looks like my last relationship." Someone else, "It's beautiful, but kind of chilling." A man leaned closer to one photo and said, "Feels like you've seen it before, even if you haven't." When asked by a journalist if the collection was about a breakup, Lena answered simply, "No. It's a study of repetition. And what happens when you notice it." The write-up the next morning called it a quiet riot of emotional déjà vu. Lena didn't read the whole piece. She didn't need to. The photos had already said what she couldn't. She returned to the gallery alone after closing, sat in the middle of the floor, and looked up at the images like constellations. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel healed. But she felt real. She'd taken something rehearsed and made it unrepeatable. Not through revenge, but through witness. Through framing it. Through saying without saying, "I saw you. I saw me. I see it now." And that, in its own quiet way, was freedom. She didn't break him. She didn't expose him. She just showed him. Through 34 frames. That she had been watching all along. But in our next story, a woman from Tribeca doesn't take quiet revenge. She doesn't make art out of her pain. She weaponizes the truth. Because when her fiancé's mistress confesses everything, they don't become enemies. They become partners. Stay with us for the next chapter in 10 True Affair Stories from New York. Because sometimes, the only thing worse than betrayal is realizing you were never the only one. And neither was she.